So, good morning, Russell Paul Arthur. Thanks again for joining me, Karen Dodd Wise Women Weekdays. Thank you for those of you that are watching. We were having a conversation to those of you that are watching, including Russell, and I just said, hang on, let me press the button to record it because although we're talking about common law and all that kind of stuff, which is everything really, isn't it? We're talking about working, overwork, and I just, how are you doing? You always start a conversation, hello, how are you? And most of us just say, yeah, I'm fine, but quite often we're not. And so when I just asked Russell, how are you? What did you say? Good morning, Russell. What did you
Well,
say?
yeah, of course. So when you asked how am I doing, I said, well, yeah, I'm getting on with things. I'm rolling with the punches, but I got to a stage where I was overworking, and I get to a point where I become hyper focused with work. I become very neurotic, and my mind goes into overdraft. Everything else feeds to the side, and then just I zero in on the work. And I was saying to you that imagine going to a gym every day and then just doing nothing but working out your bicep muscle. And if you did that every day, there would be no time for the muscle to recuperate, to regenerate, and to grow. And in fact, you'd end up causing damage to your bicep muscle. You would cause serious harm to it, the
Yeah.
physicality side of things. And I was saying that the same is true with the brain, which is like a muscle. So if you're going to work every day and you're thinking hyper focused on work, you're going to do yourself some
Yeah.
serious damage. So, like I
Yeah.
said to you, Karen, I just when I get to that point where it's too much, I'm very quick to be aware of that, and then I just pull back and just take a bit of time, and then just sort of pick things up very very slowly.
Well, it's good you
And
can recognize it because many people don't recognize that. They keep going and they get burnt out, and whatever
yeah,
capacity, whether it is going to the gym, whether it's running, whether it's going on a diet, whether it's working, sitting at the computer, and it can be obsessive. And I know of somebody that got so fit. I say fit, I would say fat actually through muscle. He was
right.
so strong. He was a friend of a friend. It's not somebody I knew personally, but the story came to me that he did all this weightlifting and he was so strong. But he couldn't run for the bus. He could hardly breathe because he was so muscular, which is okay.
Gotcha.
It's an extreme thing of what you're saying. And I also remember, oh God, in a previous lifetime, a clip I watched of Arnie Schwarzenegger when he was a
Yeah.
Mr. Universe, I think. And one of the clips he said was, if his muscle here, like you were just indicating, wasn't strong enough, then he would do that like a sculpture, to
Yeah.
make sure. So again, that's obsessive, isn't it? It's great that you
Oh, yeah.
recognize it with what you're doing.
And it's also, and Karen, it's also addictive because I mean,
Yeah.
many years ago, when I was in my say mid 20s, I mean, I was very egotistical, very headstrong, and it was my will, and I got into fitness in a very big way, and I run 2 marathons and one triathlon, trained for them, and I got to a point where I was training 5 to 6 hours a day and going to work. So I would get up like 5 o'clock in the morning, go for an hour and a half run, then I would go straight to the gym, work out for an hour and a half, then I would go to work. And what that does is you kind of get addicted to the release of the adrenaline inside
Yes, you
your
do.
body,
Yeah.
because it's a very hyperactive hormone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you also get addicted to the stress as well,
Well,
you
you
know.
do. No, you do. And as a yoga teacher, sort of semi-retired, I don't really teach now. I just fill in for people. But I always would start my class with a slowing down of the breath. Because like you
Yes.
say, it's these hormones, we are all addicted to. I'm just stroking my dog here if you're wondering what my arms are doing. Um, yeah, we are like even getting to a class or getting anywhere, getting to a bus, getting to work, the adrenaline or the cortisol, that stress, the stress hormones push us. And these days we're totally on in that world, don't we? Rush, rush, rush.
Yes.
Where's my keys? Where's this? Where's that? We're always fast. Just even if you're going out on a social thing, meeting a friend, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. So I think with the yoga world, and that's moved on into breath work, I would always start the class with slowing down and breathing. So you're in that parasympathetic. You're not in the flight and fight and freeze and going off, chasing for your dinner. You're just breathing and you're healing yourself, but it's a conscious effort. So that's why I really respect the fact what you're doing now. You're saying you've
Yes.
obviously got that personality, that characteristic of, you know doing whatever it is, whatever the subject is, but you see that in yourself. So now you're saying pause, have a cup of tea, watch some crap on
Absolutely.
Netflix is what I do.
And to look to look at it from a spiritual perspective,
Oh, I
if
like
you're
this.
if you are constantly on the go, and you are stuck within the mechanics of thought, of conditioned repetitive thought, then you are not taking time out to clear your mind, to take a back seat from the thoughts and allow whatever comes into your awareness or your
Yeah.
perception by being connected to everything that is
Yeah.
spiritual that's around you. So I think it's very important to have that time off, so you can also go into a contemplative and reflective state of everything that's just happened in the past 24 hours
Yeah.
or in the past beyond that. But if you don't take that time off, you don't have those days in between the real work hard, and you don't take that back seat, then you can't go into a state of reflection, can you? You can't.
No, because you're not in a state of balance, in whether that's
Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all because we are these holistic beings and we have to look after every aspect of it.
Yes.
And I think that's really coming into the fore now. I think, so many people are aware of that. If you think of, let's go back to yoga again, years ago, people thought yoga was a bit weird, but now it's just like an everyday occurrence. It's an everyday
Yeah.
word, isn't it? Same with breath work, and people say, "Oh, I'm a Reiki healer, I'm a spiritual." All this stuff, it's becoming the norm, which is good because we are holistic beings, and we need
Yes.
to put on the oxygen mask first when the plane's going down, because you can't help others if you're not looking after yourself. So,
Yes, and also believe that for me, well, for me personally, when I get into that state where I pull away from the work, that's when I start to receive my strongest intuitions and visions, which are taking me on to the next phase in life. They're
yes.
pulling me in the next direction. So yeah, very important. But today
Yeah, today.
we're
Today,
going to get
Malcolm,
focused
yeah.
on that presentation.
Yeah. I was going to say, no, today, Matthew, I want to be. Do you remember that program? Today,
I do.
Matthew. Yeah, I think it was Matthew, not Malcolm. Yes, I've printed it off so that I know what we're talking about. I'm still in part one. I just want to start off. Okay, great. It was great last week chatting to you, if it was last week. And I say I'll always look at the comments. I think you do sometimes. And there's one that's just come up.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen it. That says from Oh, I know. I think I know this person, Gary. And do you think that the Islamic State of the UK will honour the trusts? Laugh out loud, or lots of love, haha. I
Right.
doubt it. I only wish everyone wakes up soon, or we are no longer going to have the securities and protections to have these trusts acknowledged. Come on, Karen. I really thought you were smarter than this. Thanks, Gary. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm
Okay.
not. Maybe I don't care. So, what are you going to say about that one?
That's interesting. Okay, so the Islamic State. Okay, I don't really follow the news too much, and I don't follow the mainstream media because I've come to the conclusion most of it's all absolute BS, and
Hmm.
it's a narrative that's being crafted to make you think a certain way or to divide you against certain religions and certain types of people. And this Islamic State, am I assuming that it's based in the UK? Is that right? You
Yeah,
know,
I know Gary, and hello,
yeah,
Gary. And Gary's very knowledgeable in this subject,
yeah,
not the Islamic State. Well, in what we're talking about, he's very
yeah,
knowledgeable. And perhaps I would say maybe Gary, you're obsessive with it because your knowledge. He's one of those people that he can remember things and dates and times and names and stuff like that. I can't. It just goes straight through me. But what he's talking about, obviously, you're not in the UK at the moment, but we've got a lot of, a lot of immigrants. Not. I say they're welcomed,
yes,
perhaps, but they're not invited. They're coming in on their own free will, and you can see the change. And I think that's what he's thinking. And he's
yeah.
probably referring to something called the clergy plan, which is another subject. But there's going to be
It,
like a takeover, so that's what he's referring to.
Yeah. So if there is, of course, a complete takeover and a complete change of the nation state, and then a new sovereign body comes into power, and it's no longer the British Crown, it's no longer anything to do with what's established at the moment, it becomes a proper, genuine, and official Islamic state, then everything's off the table, and
Yeah,
who knows
yeah,
what's going to happen.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
open season, isn't it?
And I think that can be fear based because I read, I pick up, I read bits and pieces or through YouTube or whatever people send me. And in some part of the country, I can't remember where it was in our country, in England, or the UK, they're saying, we're not allowed dogs. A certain religion culture says we don't have
Yeah.
dogs. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, the Englishman and his dog, they go hand in hand. So things, we can fearmonger, can't we? We can put these
Yes.
ideas out, no dogs, no trusts, all this sort of stuff. But there's a lot of fear in that as well. And I think,
There
again, we've
is.
just got to look after the individual.
We have, and I'm very skeptical of any major changes that happen into the structure of the society, because if any changes are going to happen, the crown, who's currently in charge, are going to facilitate it and allow it.
Yes.
Yeah, because these are Islamic communities that are coming in or building whatever, they're being allowed to come in
Yeah.
and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the crown didn't want it, they would close the border down and they would stop them coming in.
Yeah.
So there's something going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of, and I would imagine that the heads of all states are, in some room somewhere, forming some kind of treaties to allow them all to coexist for
Well,
whatever
yeah,
reasons.
it's called the clergy plan, and
Yeah,
Sandy Adams knows a lot about it. I did an interview with her a while back, and she's going around the country for many years,
yes,
and she talks about it. And again, you can quite easily Google this. This isn't a conspiracy thing for those that
yeah,
don't know about it. Just tap it into your computer, and it will tell you about the clergy plan, which is kind of
yes,
a bit of, to dilute the I don't know if I well the white person. There's some words I don't know what I'm allowed to say and can and can't say now. So white person, they're trying to
which is
dilute us and culture, and it's removing cultures and stuff like this. But I'm digressing a
yes.
little bit because I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense because, and that makes sense what you're saying because a culture or an individual that is divided, so the culture is divided with different fractions and different religions against each other, or the individual within his own body and mind is divided, cannot stand, right? And if you cannot stand, you cannot defend and
Yeah. Yeah.
uphold
No,
your status and
exactly.
all the rest of it.
Exactly.
But I would say this one final thing on those comments that you said there is that if you can't do what you want to do in the current climate of the current country that you're in, it's time to move.
Well, you're not here.
So
You're not, but to
it's
be honest, I mean that's another conversation for debate. It is very tempting. I know a lot of people that are jumping ship, and for me, I ain't going anywhere. I think you talked about spirituality, which whilst I was preparing for this, I was making my pot of tea. I was going to ask you about spirituality and sovereignty and what you think the link is, but I think what's going on in the world started here, and I think it's got to end here in the UK. It's the motherland, and if you think of the city of London, where lots of these laws and clubs and secret societies started, and like octopus tentacles, we've gone out to the Commonwealth, and yeah, there is a massive agenda which is coming to light. Let's put it that way. I mean, yesterday, 17th of February 2026. So we entered the Chinese New Year of the Fire Horse. And there was a solar thing, wasn't it? What do you call it? The eclipse or something, or the moon, something
right.
else up there. I can't, I'm terrible. And something else was going, oh, Pancake Day. And it was Pancake Day. But it's a big day in the cycle of a calendar. And all these things are coming out now. And I think we are going through this year is going to be quite phenomenal for people becoming aware of the truth of what the matrix is all about, what it is like to
Yes.
the actual truth of how this country, of this world, is being governed. So it started here, and I think it's going to end here. I think that the change, it will come back here. So jumping ship, going to another country, to me, isn't the answer, because also it will get you, it will just get you later.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, what's going on in the UK is going on in Europe, in Americas, in Canada, and right across,
Western,
even into
yeah, all the
Asia. Yeah, the
Western
whole
worlds,
thing,
yeah.
the whole template. And you can move about and enjoy your freedom, but of course, if you want to remain established where you are, then you need to deal with the circumstances where you are. And I see that there's a bifurcation taking place in society because you've got the people that are completely awake and completely aware, completely switched on to what's going on, and more and more is being revealed to them, and they are making a decision on a very conscious and spiritual level that I don't want nothing to do with this whatsoever. And of course, you've got the other part of society, which is a huge majority that are very deeply in sleep, very deeply embedded in the system, not awake, not aware of what's going on, and they're just it's the blind leading the blind, isn't it? They're following the leaders,
Yeah.
following the systems, and they're going deeper into it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I have absolutely no idea how that's going to play out, but at the end of the day, we should be able to live in a world where it's live and let live, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's what you're all about. And when I said earlier, it's about looking after the individual, I thought I better come back to that
Yeah,
as well. I'm not saying just me, but if you're looking after yourself, then you can look after other people and you can look after your communities. But be individual within your community. You don't have to follow the narrative and do what everybody else is doing, which is communitarianism. It's like in the days of COVID when everybody had to wear some nappy on their face, and if you didn't, you were like, oh my God. So if that person chose not to wear a nappy on his face, he had that or she had that right to do so. But with
yes,
communitarianism, everybody has to do it, and that is a very dangerous, way to live your life. So you have to, yeah, be a critical thinker, think for yourself, but then care about your community. But you can't care about your community unless you've looked after yourself in every which way. So let's move
absolutely.
on. Yeah, two. We're talking about part two, private trust presentation.
Yes, we are. So shall I get this up and loaded?
Yeah,
Shall
yeah,
I? I'm
yeah.
just
Let's hopefully you can share your screen. I think I pressed the right button. As I say, I'm not a technical
okay.
person and I'm crap with remembering words and names and places and things like
Okay.
that. That's not my forte. And as
Bear with
you're
me
as
for a
you're trying to bring it up, yeah, I just mentioned the disclaimer, which you've got here. I don't know if that's in reverse actually, or might it's probably gonna
Okay, bear with
come
me for
up.
one second. We'll pull this presentation up. Takes a little bit of time, but we'll get there in a moment.
Yeah, sure. So we had a sunny day here in the UK. You'd be happy. Are you still in Thailand?
Yeah, yes, I'm still in Bangkok at the moment.
Lovely.
So
So
all is
yeah.
good. Good. It's absolutely fine, and I'm happy to be here. So all is good. Can you see that, Karen?
Yes, I can see it. It's not totally full screen, but I don't think it would be because you and I are sitting on the top. So yeah, part two, private trust presentation, the remedy and solution with
Yeah.
sovereignty.
So here, absolutely, because the last time we met up in part one, we were speaking about the deception and the fraud of citizenship and how we are all indentured into public trust arrangements with the Crown Estate. So, yes, here's part two, where we jump into the remedy and the solution, which is all about sovereignty. Shall I read off this disclaimer and advisory?
I would move on. Yeah, I mean people can pause it and read it themselves, can't they? But there is a
Of course, they
disclaimery and
can.
advisor, a disclaimery, disclaimer and advisory there.
There we go. So let's move on. I'm just going to do a quick reminder of what we
Yep,
were talking about, just a very quick reminder. But I do obviously encourage your audience to go back, or if they haven't already seen it, and look at part one because it will really give the context of what we're going to go into in this presentation. So, what we were talking about in part one was how that we are all involved in this sovereign structure of control and extortion, where you have the crown and the state at the very top, and they have formed a complete corporate legal system of top-down rulership, hierarchy of rulership, where we have obviously the crowns, the government, the Bank of England, all the public agencies that are governing, controlling all the UK citizens who are members of the general public within a public domain, which is a venue and jurisdiction controlled by the public agencies. And how did we all get into this mess? Through birth, registration, indentureship. So when our births were registered at the General Register's office when we were very, very young as babies, something happened. The Crown Estate created what is known as a UK citizen, which is a legal person entity that is owned and controlled by the state. And we, as the living being, became bonded to that UK citizen as the bonded surety, as the signatory and the guarantor of everything that we do in the public domain in the name of the UK citizen. But both us as a living being and a citizen are two different things. And then we got on to the fact that the actual UK citizen within the public domain is a legal title holder and trustee of everything that the citizen does when it comes to registering and licensing for something in a public domain. So in this example here, we've got real estate. If you're a citizen, you go to HM Land Registry to register your property. They will give you a legal property title. They will hand it to you. You become the trustee who's holding the legal title. Therefore, you have the legal responsibility and liability to take care of any rules, regulations, codes, you name it, they're attached to that title. And where the title is placed in the public trust. So what we wanted to do to correct this situation is to reclaim the equity of our life, to restore our position as a living man or woman in a private trust arrangement with the Crown Estate rather than being a citizen who is in a public trust arrangement with the Crown Estate. Because in the Crown Estate, which operates with two ledgers at HM Treasury, the public ledger and the private ledger, You've got the citizen who operates on the public side, which is incorporated into the Crown estate, which is the legal title holder and an insolvent debtor of the banking system, which is a debt-based global banking monetary system. But on the private side of the ledger is where we are as the living man or woman who has private equity in a private state with sovereign status, and we are equitable title holder of any value that is placed in the public trust arrangement, because these public trusts within the public domain are holding the value of our actual estate. Okay, so in the private, it is our estate as the living beneficiary of the estate, but because they've created this UK citizen on the public side, which is a public domain that's under debt administration, they've made us the trustee of this trust. So we've been deceived, we've been defrauded into playing this fictional character, and we now want to restore our status in the public domain. And there are three elements of sovereignty. This is where we get into the remedy and solution. There are three elements for us to gain sovereignty in relation to the public domain and the Crown estate. Number one, we undergo a status correction. So this is an actual, official, and lawful procedure to sever and separate our actual life from the UK citizen. And we do this, Karen, with a document called the Declaration of Status, which is a document that's well over 100 pages that states all the substantial basis and reasons and motivations as to why we can actually cancel and rescind citizenship, actually remove our life from the Crown and state. A very comprehensive document. Once we've done that, Karen, we then go into what's known as a status protection, because as it stands at the moment, each citizen of the UK, even once you've corrected your status, even once you've cancelled and rescinded citizenship, and now you're standing in the private as a living man or woman, your entire life, everything that you earn, own, and owe, your entire estate has been built in the public domain in the name of the citizen. And of course, because this entire fabric of society has been established as a public domain with all the public agencies, in order for us to live, we have no other choice but to continue using the public services. So we need to find a way to be able to stand with the status of a living man or woman with sovereign authority that lives in the private, that is not part of the public domain. And at the same time, we need to be able to go back into the public domain, access the public services without legally bonding our life back to the system, so that we can protect our status and hold our new status. And then number three, the third element of sovereignty is estate privatization. And what that basically means is we go through a procedure to establish a new private estate structure, which is a multi-jurisdictional and multi-layered estate with various different trusts and associations and contracts that are designed to hold assets and interests in the private, completely separate and completely independent from the public domain. And once we've done that, we can then actually transfer the equity and rights of the estate in the public domain out of the public and into the new private estate. And that's when we can begin our new journey into building a new world paradigm. So those are the three things.
Can I just ask a couple of questions here?
Yes.
Because I didn't want to stop you whilst you're on the flow. So this 100-page document, this Declaration of Status,
yes,
people are going to say, well, I want to do that. You know, how do they do that?
So this Declaration of Status, this is a document that establishes your sovereignty and rescinds and cancels citizenship at the same time, and where you are sending that document and forming that document in various different laws, from estate law to property law to trust law and the law of equity. So the first thing you need to do is you need to understand the laws. Okay, so you need to go through a process of studying, learning, and integrating the different laws that apply to a status correction. Then you need to actually study the document itself, which takes a lot of time, by the way. It takes months actually to actually fully comprehend the document, fully understand it to a point where you feel 100% certain and confident to stand by the words of the document. Because once you express this document, Karen, you're expressing your sovereign free will to change your status, and your will shall be done. Right?
Mm.
Nobody in this world has the right to tell you what you can or cannot do with your life. So once you issue this document to the state, you're expressing your free will. So we within inside our Sovereignty Academy, we actually guide people how to study and learn the document and how to actually issue the document to the
Yeah.
nation state. So that's a process that we do. I know that there are other private societies in this world that do something similar. Okay. I was a member of one in America for a couple of years. They have a declaration of status process. So I think you'll find it's not just me and my organisation doing it. There's various other organisations, but someone, Karen, does have to go through the process.
Okay, so two questions come up there. So firstly, again, it's taking responsibility for your own actions. It's not just a case of going to somebody saying, "Oh, I want out, do it for me, how much?" and signing a check. You have to really understand this because you're living this, aren't you? It's a whole new lifestyle. It's a way of living, a way of being. You can't just
Yes.
turn up at a solicitor. So if somebody goes to a solicitor or a lawyer, whatever you want to call them, and say, I want to, change my declaration of status. I imagine the lawyer wouldn't know what you're talking about for a start, would you? Would they? Would they
They
have
would.
any idea?
No, they would. And it's so good that you brought that up because the system is built to trap you, right? So let's say you wanted to no longer be a British citizen. Then the system, you can go look into the system and do the research, and they go, okay, no problem. You can become a non-resident. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can you can go abroad and live abroad. We'll give you a legal status of a non-resident, non-citizen, whatever it is. They've got various different other terms. But what happens is when you go down that route and you do an application or submit a form, all you're basically doing is rebinding yourself back into the global system of having a corporate legal status as defined by the system. So no, you are correct that the declaration of status is not something you're going to find in the legal system because it's not something they do. It is a procedure that has been created and developed and refined over many, many, many hundreds of years, and it's been passed on and passed on and passed on, and it's been adapted through various different organizations. So, for example, the declaration status that we use within our society, this is something that I've learned from another organization in America that they used for the American system. And of course, the English system is slightly different. So I've had to go through the document that I learned from them, and I've had to completely adjust it so that it can be used for the United Kingdom. So it's become a completely different document. And it's something that if you're going to do this, then you need to be getting involved with some type of private society. You need to be getting involved with some type of sovereign organization.
Okay. And I know in the early days when this all started to kick off, so back in 2020, um, I invited somebody to come and talk in Sussex, and he was talking about the barons. And do you know anything about the barons? And that's who our allegiance was to, and we wrote to the barons or something, and then we filled in a bit of paper and sent it to Washington. So we can leave the barons behind, but I'm referring really to Washington in the US because you're saying you did something in America, and then you've chosen to do your own thing now. So we're two different countries here. If we do this status correction in the UK, does that apply worldwide, globally? If I'm allowed to say globally?
Yeah, so what I've done is because in the sovereignty movement, there's a lot of people making a lot of assumptions.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people just going on things through hearsay, and they're not doing the research themselves. They're not verifying the facts of things. So I'm someone that everything that I do, I do it to a point where I'm happy to pass it on to the people that I love, knowing that I'm 100% certain I'm right about it. If I don't know something, if I cannot get verifiable proof of something, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not real. It don't exist. So there's many aspects of the sovereignty movement, documents that I've adopted from the sovereignty movement. I've had to go through them documents and just weed out all the crap, basically the stuff that's false, all the assumptions that can't be verified, that can't be, and then that took me on a journey of going, well, what actually is real then? What can I actually confirm? And so my documents in terms of the declaration station are very, very different. I really just get to the very simple, basic facts of reality. And those documents, again, it's very hard to explain it because you would need to really look at the document
Mm.
as a whole to understand what's going on. Um, but for example, let's look at America. America, they have the Uniform Commercial Code, right?
Yeah.
In the UK, we don't. We have the
Yeah.
Securities Act, the Bill of Exchange Act. Yeah. So a lot of people are going over, are looking at America and look at their sovereignty movements and methods, and they're going, oh, right, I will now apply the Uniform Commercial Code to the UK. Well, you can't because it doesn't work. It's not operational in the UK. So there are many different variations for the United Kingdom, and it's been my duty and my responsibility as the overseer of my society to get down, boil everything down to the facts, and make sure that everything is applicable to the United Kingdom in terms of doing a status correction. But the most important thing is this: is that in the status correction, we are notifying the Crown and State that we've become aware of the deception and fraud of citizenship. We've become aware of the fact that they've become default executors of our life and estate as being administrated by HM Treasury. And we are letting them know that we are now correcting our status and are coming forward as a living beneficiary to claim and take control of our estate that we have been deprived of because we have been designated as a citizen and a trustee who is an insolvent debtor in the public domain in their fictional game. Yeah. And all of that is fact. And in the document, we put all the facts and all the necessary links to all the necessary sightings and that we put that confirms that. So it's very thorough, but someone would really need to study that document. And anyone that comes to our Sovereignty Academy, we basically make sure that they do understand the document before they issue the document. So months, Karen. It takes months to learn stuff.
I'm sure it does. As I say, it's a way of changing your life here, isn't it? It's not just changing your diet. It's a lifestyle. It's a massive thing. And the other thing I was going to talk about or ask you about, and I know you're going to come back into it. So you're saying when you've come out and you've had that status correction, you become this private sovereign person. So you don't sort of comply with the Crown or whatever they want. People say, well, if I do that, then how, I want a passport now. So a passport or a travel document is in their system, isn't it? So things like
Yes.
that, if you want to have your one foot in the matrix and one foot out, this, I guess, is what you're going to tell us.
Oh, yeah, this is what we're going to get into this presentation because what we now need to do, once we've done the status correction and we've established ourselves as a living man or woman who's living in the private, we now need to start to restructure our life and estate in relation to the public domain. And now what we're going to do is we're going to project ourselves into the public domain through the avatar of private trusts. And it's through using private trusts that we can recontract and retrust with all the public agencies, with all the things, including the passport, so that we can hold the passport, use the passport, but we do so as a living beneficiary of a trust, and where the passport is contained in a private trust, subject to private terms that we stipulate. So let's get into that. Let's move a little bit forward in this presentation, because that's what we were just talking about. How do we access the public system while maintaining sovereignty? So first and foremost, I want to highlight this fact. Everything that we're doing, it is a lawful remedy. Okay, so we've realized the deception and fraud, and now we're coming back to correct the mistake and error. And there's three things that we're going to do. Number one, we're going to exercise a rightful claim. So we're going to need to claim the equity, the true value of our life and estate as the sole heir and living beneficiary. And as the sole heir and living beneficiary of our estate, we have a paramount claim and priority interest in everything that we've done in the name of the citizen, right? So the UK citizen, we know, is a legal title and a bond to the Crown Estate that they own, that they created. But everything that we created as the bonded sureties, the living man or woman, does rightfully belong to us, the equity, the real value. And what we're going to do is we're going to now exercise the law of equity. So the law of equity, we might have spoken about this in the first presentation, is the law of laws. It's the law that addresses any injustice that has been caused in the exercise of any other laws. So if a law has done something wrong, then equity comes in to apply fairness and balance to re-adjudicate that law. And there are some maxims of equity. So there's about 12 maxims of equity. Two I want to mention to you right now are very important and relevant to what we're doing. Here's the first one. Equity will not suffer a wrong to be without a remedy. So that's a principle and truth of the law of equity. If we have suffered a wrong, then there must be a remedy to correct that wrong. And because we were defrauded and deceived into citizenship at birth registration, we are now coming forward to correct that in accordance with the law of equity. Here's another important maxim of equity for you. Equity regards the beneficiary as the true owner. So that means if you are the living beneficiary of a trust, then you, in accordance with the law of equity, are considered the true owner of the property in the trust. On the basis that in all public trust arrangements, on the public side, you have the citizen who is the trustee, and us on the private side, the living beneficiary, we can now come forward in accordance with the law of equity and say, right, I'm the living beneficiary of everything that's in these public trusts, and I'm the true owner. Therefore, I want these trusts dissolved so I can now take the equity, take control of the equity and place it into a private trust. And that brings me to the third thing, Karen, which is exercising the law of the trusts, because once we claim and secure the equity, we need obviously to create a new private trust that we control in the private as a living man or woman with sovereign authority. And of course, all of this is done peacefully in law and honour.
And
Would you
honour.
like to add anything?
Yeah, okay. So when you're talking about trusts, I'm following it because I think I've got a trust set up myself. Um, but when you're talking about trust in the public, are you talking about stuff, things, assets that somebody's already put in a trust? Or
Yeah,
you are. So we're not talking about this SKV thing here. Okay. I want people to understand this is stuff that you already own, whether it's a car or
yeah.
a television or a house. It's stuff that you've owned that you've put in a trust. Or because most people haven't put things in a trust because
Ah,
they're not aware of it, are they?
actually, no. This is where we need to. This is where we need to peel something back here and
Yeah.
get behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
there's a sit like you just mentioned, Karen, as a citizen that can create a trust to put their real estate into a trust. Okay, and if you do that in a public system, you are creating effectively a public trust because you have to register in the public trust registration system to get a trust number, and then the Crown, State, and Inland Revenue actually treat that trust as an extension of you as a citizen. So even though you formed a trust, it's still part of you and your estate as a citizen. What I'm talking about is the fact that everything you think is yours in the public isn't actually yours. It's all tied up in public trust. So let me give you an example. And we touched on this briefly on the first presentation. When you go um, to HM Land Registry as a citizen to register that real estate and get a legal property title or have the legal property title transferred over to you as the new owner. But what's happening is in that arrangement is you are first and foremost not going to the land registry as a living person with equity. You are going to the land registry as a UK citizen, which is a legal title owned by the Crown and State. So basically, you're operating. Every person right now, unbeknownst to themselves, unbeknownst that they're operating as legal persons and entities in the system, not operating as living men and women. And what's happening is you're going to the land registry as a franchise of the state, and the land registry is handing you a legal property title. And when the land registry hands you a legal property title, they're actually creating an implied trust arrangement with you, where you are now holding the property title as a trustee in a public trust arrangement, and the real estate is actually public property that belongs to the public domain that's controlled by the Crown and State, and where the real estate is now in a public trust arrangement as property of a public trust. So you think you own that property. You don't. The public trust owns the property. HM Land Registry are the grantor and the settler of that trust, and you are positioned as the citizen and a trustee who's holding the legal title. So this comes down to your car. When you go register your car in the public system, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're arriving as the citizen, a legal entity, franchise of the state. They're giving you the driver's license and DVLA car registration form. That's being handed to you, an implied trustee form. You're the trustee, and all those titles and documents which represent the value of the house, the car, or the business, whatever it is that you're registering in the UK, that's all contained within a trust arrangement as property of the trust. And you have owner's rights. but you have owners' rights to hold, use, possess, enjoy, sell, transfer, and profit from property, but you don't own the property.
Yeah. Okay.
Owning
So
the
so
right, yeah, go
yeah,
on.
yeah, no, I totally understand that, and I've just misunderstood because you look at your car bit of paper, whatever it is, that bit of paper, when you get a new car, and it
Yeah,
says you are the registered keeper. So you're not the owner. So the registered keeper basically means you're the trustee. That's another word for two words for
yeah.
trustee. Okay. Okay. So I
Because we,
hadn't, I'd never seen it like that. I'd never seen, I understand exactly what you're saying. You're registering stuff and you're getting a certificate or a bit of paper, but that stuff that you're registering, you're putting it basically in a trust, in a public trust.
absolutely 100%. So your whole life, your whole
Yeah.
estate, everything that you earn, own, and owe in the public system is all wrapped up in various different public trust arrangements.
Right.
So, uh, it, so that's the fraud and that's the deception. So what we're doing with the remedy and solution is we're now coming back. So we've realised that the fraud and deception. We're now going to cancel and rescind citizenship. We're going to now cut the legal bondage. We're now longer part of that trustee or that citizen. We're now going to step forward as the true living man or woman, the true living beneficiary of everything that's in these trusts, and we're now going to reclaim it all. And we're now going to put it all into new private trusts where we do actually own the equity of everything and we control it in the private. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mate, it makes sense. I'm glad I asked that actually because I didn't get it. I know about the registered keeper, but I didn't know that was also the same as a trust. So I'm glad for my own little brain. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
Because what you said there, these terms that you just mentioned there, so the registered keeper, or if you're the director of a business, or you're a homeowner, leaseholder, freeholder, these
Yeah,
are all titles.
yeah,
And if you're a
yeah,
legal title holder in the system, you are a trustee. You're in a trustee arrangement as a legal title holder. So you've got the legal title holders in the public side, and you've got the living men and women in the private side that hold the true equity. Because a fictional legal entity that does not exist cannot hold real value, cannot own real
right.
value. Only something that is actually real, a living, breathing, living man or woman, can actually claim and own value, something of substantive real value. So that's what we're achieving with these private trusts. So
Can I just ask this other question? Again, this is me being a bit blonde here. Sorry for genuine blondes, but what is the real advantage? Because I'm thinking, okay, I know enough about trust, not enough. I know a little bit about trust and the public and the private. But if you are okay I'm living in a very nice house that is registered, so theoretically it's in a trust. But I'm enjoying it. I'm the benefactor, the beneficiary. I'm enjoying it, and then when I pass, it will go down the line or whatever. It will go, to my offspring. Now, that's all well and good, isn't it? What's wrong with it, other than the fact that I'm going to be, or they're going to be lumped with a massive, inheritance tax bill? Is that what we're trying to do here? Are we avoiding tax? Oh, sorry, is that
so
the wrong word or not avoiding? There's another word
no,
you're
that's
supposed to say. Yeah, but is,
I'm
is
glad you
that is
said that.
yeah, is that the reason we're doing? Because otherwise, I'm quite happy living here and paying my bills or watering the plants or whatever it is that I do. So, what is the real advantage of putting everything into a private trust or becoming sovereign? Can't we just all plod along and just enjoy ourselves?
Yeah, so we can do both. It depends on what each one of us chooses to do. So if you've got a nice, comfortable life and you're happy with absolutely everything and you're oblivious to everything that's going on and there's no pain, no trauma, and you're happy just to plod along as you are and you're happy paying all your taxes and any penalties and fines that come through the door and you're happy being under the authority of the Crown and State and all the public agencies, that's the kind of life you want, then there's no reason for you to do this. None whatsoever. So but if you have reached a certain state of consciousness where you are very aware of what's going on, very aware of the deceptions, if you can recognize that the current status quo is a complete affront and dishonor to humanity and life itself, if you know that the current system is a complete inversion of reality and that it could be a far better world and a far better system, not just for yourself, but also for your loved ones and your children and their children and all the future generations. if you want to be part of a movement that's going to turn this back around so that we can create a new future rather than going into this total dystopian nightmare that all these nation states we can clearly see are heading down, then you would want to get on board and do this,
Yeah.
because in order for us to, let's say, come together as sovereign people who form sovereign organizations and private societies, not only are we doing it for ourselves, but we're also doing it to create a new world paradigm, to create the world that we actually want to see. And for us to do that, we need to find a way to take back control of our life and estate, to take back control of the value and rights that we currently have in the current system, and then be able to transfer that across into a new system so that we can start to use the value of what we got to build new systems and services that actually benefits humanity.
Yeah.
So that's why you wouldn't do it, and that's why you would do it. Is that?
I'm glad I asked, because I am asking. I'm just trying to think what people might
Yeah.
ask as well, not just for myself, because we are really enslaved. And when you say that to somebody, say, well, we're enslaved. They say, well, no, we're not, because I can go on holiday and get my roast dinner on a Sunday and fish and chips on a Friday and go to the pub. I'm having a really nice life, but we are in their system, aren't we? And an example of this, a very simple example. I came back from Thailand over Christmas. And I was away for a month, and I was on the train with my ticket, but I didn't have my network, discount card or whatever it is. And the little woman came along and said, tickets and cards, please. And I said, I've got my ticket, but I haven't got my network card. And she says, well, that's a criminal offence. And I kind of laughed. And I thought, wow, a criminal offence. And she remember it next time. She was one of these little jobs things. But it just reminded me of how, if we are carrying on living in the matrix, how we are being controlled. And we have to follow their rules, or we
I'm
don't.
so I-
Excuse
I'm
me.
so I'm so glad you just said that. And I just want to pick up on something you just said there about that situation with the ticket and where they said it was a criminal offence. You've just highlighted a very important fact. We do live in a very inverted, perverted world where justice has now become injustice, and where we are going down the road of a very tyrannical government that's completely overreaching and blowing very small things into these terrible, terrible offences that are causing massive problems to people's lives. So, for example, there was recently people posting Facebook posts making remarks about people when they're getting put in jail or something, are they?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that,
Knock at the
which is
door 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're being
yeah,
arrested. Yeah.
it's
Well,
insanity. It's a
yeah, hurty words they call it.
complete disproportional response and consequence. So that's injustice, right? Now, the whole point of setting everything up in private trusts is that you actually remove yourself from all personal liability to the system. So, what's very important to mention is this: as sovereigns, we are not going to become lawless people. In fact, we are going to become the exemplars of law, where law is actually working and providing real justice. Yeah. So, fairness and balance, and making sure that everybody's freedoms, values, and rights are respected. However, when the law oversteps and creates injustice, or where they've punished you and persecuted you disproportionately to anything that you've done, then we are fully protected in a private trust arrangement, because the whole situation has been contained in a private trust, and it's been contained under private trust laws. So we're able to now be responsible and liable for any damages, harm that we've caused within society, within a framework of law that actually does provide justice, which we should do if we are responsible and liable, if we're going to be good humans. But if there is something where the government has overreached, then we can take a step back and we can put up the protections that we have with the private trusts so that we are not affected. So, for example, those people that are getting locked up for their Facebook comments, right? They're getting locked up because they're citizens, because they're legally bonded to the system. And the system has a legal mandate, the authority and right to lock up the citizens. But if you're a living beneficiary that's operating in a private trust and you're projecting yourself into the system for a private trust, they can't come after you because you're not legally bonded to the system and you're not a UK citizen. So there are various benefits. It all
Yeah.
depends on what you're looking for in your specific life. So, and you mentioned tax earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Once you've put everything into private trusts that are independent and separate from the system, these trusts are immune to tax.
But there is going to be a battle, isn't there? Because let's say I know of people that have had a new baby. Or in the past, their baby's now a teenager, but what they tried to do was not register their baby. They didn't want a birth certificate, and they were going to be fined or worse, because then you're fighting the system and maybe get a knock on the door from the social services and your baby or your child's taken away. So it's easier, therefore, to register your baby because you are going to have to fight for your rights, aren't you? For your private sovereign rights.
That is another great point you just raised there. So let's look at the very fact that we're living in a draconian top-down system of hierarchy and rulership, where the Crown and State imposes its will onto the citizens, and it does it through all the legislative acts. The one you just mentioned, there's a registration act that says all UK citizens must register births, marriages, and deaths. Right. So let's say, for example, you have gone and registered a birth certificate because you are being enforced by the Crown and State to do it against your will under the threat of coercion, of penalty, and all the rest of it. Yeah, which is an awful way to structure a society. But let's say you've done that with a private trust, and I'm going to explain that in this slide here. Is you can actually take that birth certificate as a living beneficiary. You can actually accept and claim that birth certificate, and then you can transfer the equity and rights of that certificate into a new private trust, where it has now become property of a private trust that you control in the private, because that birth certificate actually represents the equity and rights of your life and estate as the citizen in the public system. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that birth certificate is a certified bond that bonds your life to the citizen. So that citizen, all the value and rights of the citizen are vested in that certificate as a bond. So the moment you put it into a private trust, you've actually claimed all the equity and rights of your life and estate in relation to the Crown estate, but you've put it on a private trust. And you can do that, by the way, in accordance with the law of equity.
So you're suggesting people that have new babies to register them, so they're not going to get that knock on the door, or the social services come, trying to claim your child for whatever reason. So
Yes,
register that baby, but then go into this private trust thing. Is that the better way to do it rather than start, as you mean to go on?
absolutely.
Okay.
100%. Because the fact of the matter is this: you cannot enter into the system and you cannot use the public services and the benefits unless you are a citizen. You just can't. There's no way of
Right.
doing it.
Yeah, of course.
You have to be,
Yeah.
yeah. So, of course, and we don't want to be challenging and refusing and causing conflicts and controversy, because that's an absolute nightmare. So, just peacefully, yeah, no problem. I'll create the UK citizen, I'll register and bond it. But now I'm going to come forward and I'm going to claim it all and put it into a private trust, because I can do that because I'm expressing my sovereign will to
Yeah.
claim my equity and rights in the situation. By the way, and I'm doing this in accordance with the law of equity, which is the law that you've written yourself and you uphold in your courts.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so let's look at this one here then, Karen.
Hmm.
So this is called a private estate trust. So this goes back to the birth certificate. So what a sovereign can do is a sovereign can act as a grantor or a settler. The sovereign can create a bond, and that sovereign can create that bond where the bond is a claim which claims the equity of your life and estate, which is currently managed in HM Treasury. You place that bond into a private trust. This is a trust that you've expressed in writing, in document form. The bond goes into the trust. Also, the birth certificate that you accept and claim goes into the trust. And then what you do is you appoint HM Treasury, you appoint the Secretary of the Treasury as the trustee of the trust, who now is going to hold the legal title, and you take the position of being the living beneficiary of the trust. Now, in this trust arrangement that you've created by exercising your sovereign authority and free will, you are now the living beneficiary in it, and in accordance with the law of equity, you are the true owner of the property that's in the trust. So you are now the true owner of the equity and rights that are vested in the birth certificate, which is connected to your life and estate in the public, and also the bond. And the trustee is now holding the legal title, which means when you send the trust and all the bonds and the certificate to HM Treasury for them to hold the trust as the trustee, they are now responsible and liable for all the laws, regulations, fees, fines, penalties, taxes, and everything else that's charged in the name of the citizen because they are now trustees managing your private trust. And all of this, again, is done in accordance with the law of equity and trust law. And there's another important maxim of equity, which is called equity sees that a trust will not fail for want of a trustee. So that basically means this, and this is very important, and I'll get to the importance of it. When you express a trust to a public agency, whether it be HM Treasury, the DVLA, HM Land Registry, whatever it is that you're trying to contain in a new private trust arrangement, they are not going to recognise the trust. They're not going to accept the trust. They're not going to acknowledge the trust. They're going to ignore the trust, and there's going to be a non-response. And on the very rare occasion, they will respond, and it will be an improper response. And what happens is we go through what's known as a private administration process, where we give them opportunities to do the honourable and right thing to accept trust in accordance with trust law and the law of equity. And if they do not do the honourable thing, then by default, their silent acquiescence to the trust or their improper response means that they must still perform in accordance with trust law. The reason we do that is because, unfortunately, we are living in a system where all the officials of these public agencies are acting in arrogance of their positions and in ignorance of the law. So we're not expecting them to go, yeah, no problem. We'll change this all around for you. Yeah, we'll stop doing what we're doing and we'll give you back all the control and the equity. That's never going to happen because all these public agencies, they're all part of a public debt administration that's connected to HM Treasury and the debt department of the UK and the banking global system. So they're not just going to stop everything. But that doesn't change the fact that you have come forward as a sovereign man or woman to correct your status. You have had every right to create a private trust. You have every right and authority to claim the equity and rights of your estate and send it all back to the relevant public agency to inform them this is how you want the equity and rights of your life and estate to be managed going forward. I'll leave it there for a moment and allow you to.
Yeah, fabulous. Got all that. Can you remind me and anybody watching this video what gives us every right to make these claims?
Yeah. Okay. So it comes back down to being the creators of our own life and being the original creators and earners of everything within our life. So from birth, we have all been duped into playing the role of the citizenship of the citizen, right? And where we have been operating with a public estate that's part of the public domain that's being controlled by all these public trusts. And because we were deceived into this role and we through non-disclosure, we had no awareness of this situation, we have every right now that we have discovered this deception and fraud, to come back using the law of equity to get remedy, because the law of equity provides remedy. The law of equity is there to provide justice when there has been injustice, okay? There has been injustice. We have been defrauded and deceived into playing a citizen and a trustee in a legal title holder. So that, first of all, gives us the right. And the fact that we are the creator and the earner of the value means that we do have the right to take back what rightfully belongs to us. And so when we come forward as the living beneficiary to claim the equity and rights of our life and estate, we are asserting a paramount claim to the equity and rights which supersede the claim of the Crown and State. Because remember, the Crown and State is a corporate legal entity that was created by man. We are actually the living man. We are above and before the legal entities in this world, right? Because we're the original creators. Therefore, our claim stands paramount to any fictional corporate legal entity in this world. And the Crown and the State are exactly that. They're corporate bodies. They're legal entities.
Thank you.
We'll always have a rightful claim over.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people, and myself included, to be reminded that, we as living people, we have the right, it's under God's law. Nobody has the right to make demands of us, as long as we are, honor, being nice and kind and honorable and all that kind of stuff, and doing no harm. We can just get on with it with our lives and not be enslaved to it. Thank you. I just wanted that as a reminder for people that think, oh God, this is great, but it's a bit heavy, so thank you for that reminder. Okay, cool. Next slide or?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get on to the next slide. Let's have a look. So here is another important trust. So we've just created a private estate trust. We have claimed all the equity of our life and estate as vested in the birth certificate. It all goes into this new private estate trust, and that is being held at HM Treasury, who we've appointed as the custodians and trustees of our new trust. Now, we need to restructure the rest of our life in relation to the public system so we can continue accessing the public services. And in this slide, we address the fact that we need to continue obtaining services from the local council, right? Because the local council is the local government. So what we would now do is form a general services trust, which is another private trust arrangement. So we as a sovereign create this new general services trust. We then create a bond that is a claim and bonded to the equity that we've already secured with HM Treasury. That goes into the private trust. And then we also claim any documents or any titles, whether that be a property title or anything else, whether that be some tax document, public instrument from the council, and we put that into the new trust. We take the position as being the living beneficiary in the private side of the trust. We then appoint the highest official, which is typically either the secretary or the chief executive at the local council office. It varies from council to council. We appoint them as the trustee. We then send them the trust with all the documents and all the bonds, including copies of our birth certificate that we've already secured. And we say, right, we are now coming forth as the living beneficiary. We are now recontracting with you with this new private trust to receive the benefits that the council gives us. So that's, whether that's the street lighting, the police forces, the fire engines, the water services, everything that the council does, taking the bins away. We're now recontracting with you in this private trust, and we now have an equitable stake in this service, and we can receive the benefits as a living beneficiary. You are now the trustee. You now have the legal title to this trust. So please manage and maintain this new private trust arrangement for me. And here's the best bit. The equity of our life and estate is private property of that trust, and we can now instruct the council to use the equity of our trust to settle any claims, bills, and charges that are made in the name of the citizen in relation to the use of the public services, and ask them to ask the appointed trustee to discharge all those charges for us in accordance with the trust terms.
That's massive.
Isn't it just?
It's massive. Yes, it is. It is. So the benefit of having everything in a
Yeah.
private, or being a sovereign person, the benefit of, yeah, you're taking back control of your life. But obviously, I say it sounds easy looking at these slides that you've done and the way you describe it. But that,
Yeah.
you have to embrace, you have to really feel this, because it's not as easy as it looked, is it? It's work has to be done. I'm saying it
It's
can be easy, but you have to work it.
work has to be done. And what's very important, and again, because what I've done with these slides is I've simplified it down as much
Yeah.
as I can to make it as understandable as possible. Because if you really get into the paperwork, it can put you in a headspin. But a really important thing for your audience to take away is this. In the system, there is a private ledger and a public ledger.
Mm.
Everything on the public side is to do with legal titles, legal bonds, and it's all under a public debt administration where everybody is involved in paperwork. So it's all documents or it's fiat currency. It's all debts, claims, and charges. On the private side, on the private ledger of this system, which the Crown and State have set up, is where all the equity is, the real value. So on the private, let's say, look at HM Treasury, for example, they are administrating the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, and they're administrating not only the public debt administration, the public ledger, but they're also holding and administrating all the equity of the Commonwealth. So all the real estate property, all the assets, interest, commodities, resources, infrastructure, buildings, you name it, everything of real value, that is being held on the private side, on the private ledger, and we don't have access to that on the public side as a citizen because they never told us about that. We're just plodding along as the citizen, right? Yeah, I'll register for that, grab a legal title for that, a legal title for this, and I'll pay with my fiat currency, which is a financial debt instrument, because I don't have access to the real equity, because the real equity of everything that I think is mine is actually contained in public trusts, which is held and controlled by the Crown and State.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
And it is. And like when you talk about fiat currency, I mean, That I think we do need to do a talk about that about money, and so people understand what money is and the fact that we are in such debt, and debt creates debts, and we're the ones that pay for it, or we think we have to pay for it, but it's
Yeah.
all a bit of a fallacy really. So I think people need to be educated about that.
And there's a reason for it as well, Karen. The reason there
Mm.
is the debt administration and everything's happening in the public and the citizens are in debt with financial debt instruments is because debt equals bondage,
Yes,
bondage and
exactly.
control.
I mean, when they kept doing that furlough thing a few years ago, and furlough was a new word for many of us, and I thought, furlough? My friend had a business and she was putting her staff on furlough. I said, what's furlough? And then I realised everybody was getting furlough, furlough, furlough. And then they kept extending it, and I just thought, oh my God, the debt that this is creating, because people have to pay back. People say, oh, I'm great, I'm getting paid for watching TV or whatever, doing a jigsaw puzzle, another jigsaw puzzle. And I thought, do you not understand what is happening? And the fact that, we're running out of money, they're just printing it. They just print it like that. So it's fictitious, isn't it? It's not supported by anything. So
It is
interesting times,
fictitious.
yeah, with money, and also with like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and gold and silver going up, up, up and coming down. So I think a lesson in that would be very good.
Yeah, we can definitely come back some other time and do a presentation
Yeah,
on how the banking monetary system works
yeah,
and the fraudulent side of things there. So let's just take again another look at this. When
yeah,
it comes to setting up private trusts, we are restructuring the affairs of our life so that we are no longer in legal bondage or personal liability to any of the public services or agencies. So the moment we set up a private trust, the private trust has two venues and jurisdictions to it, because on the private side, we are the living beneficiary of the trust, who's established in the private side in the private domain, and we have no legal bondage to the actual trust property. All we do is hold the equitable title, which means we hold a title to the value of the property, which means we're entitled to the value of the property. And that's it. There's no legal bondage in that arrangement as the living beneficiary of a private trust. And then on the public side, when we issue the private trust to the public agency and appoint them as trustee, they're the one holding the legal title and the legal bond. So what's actually happening here is we as a sovereign man or woman are actually able to re-establish our life outside of the public domain within our new private domain, and then we use private trusts that can bridge across from the private into the public to hold and contain all the services that we need to continue our life, whether we're running a business, trading property, driving car, whatever it is, we can continue doing that under a private trust arrangement. So again, this is how we restore and reclaim sovereignty, but this is how we also reverse the dynamics.
yeah,
We're taking what is an inverted world and we're taking it back to being sovereign masters, and the public are now our public servants, which is how it should have been, where they should have been taking control of all the affairs of society so that we don't have to worry about it. But of course, it's all become very, very corrupt. They've turned the system round and they've made us liable for everything. And it's completely upside down.
yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. No question, sir.
Okay, cool. So that just moves on, which again I touch base on reversing the trust dynamics. If you are operating as a citizen in the public, you are a trustee in public trust arrangements with all the public agencies concerning any aspect of your life and state. And in this position, you are the trustee and you are in a liable position, absolutely liable for everything that happens, all the laws, all the regulations, all the tax codes, you name it, penalties, fees, fines, everything that's attached to a public trust or a legal title. When you become sovereign and then you start to operate with a private estate trust and other private trusts where you rebond or recontract with the public domain through the private trust, you are in a secure position because you are now the living beneficiary of the private trust and you have no legal bondage to that arrangement. And of course, the government officials are bound by duty to protect and serve the equitable interests of the sovereign as well as the public citizen. But that is easier said than done because, like I said before, we are dealing with a system where everyone is acting in arrogance of their positions and ignorance of the law. And so, what typically happens when we set up all these private trust arrangements is there is a non response or an improper response. And that's absolutely fine, Karen, because it doesn't matter how they respond on that side. we are still expressing our sovereign free will, and we have every authority and right to do that. And again, I want to go back to this very important maxim of the law of equity, which is one of the laws that we're using to restructure the thing. And the law of equity is this: a trust will not fail for want of a trustee. So that means if we set up a private trust to claim our equity and a position when it comes to a public service, and we send that trust to a public agency and we appoint them as the official, we say, okay, now you take care of things with all the legal liability. If they don't perform or they reject the trust still stands in law. The trust doesn't dissolve, the trust doesn't end, doesn't terminate, it still stands. So even though the trustee has failed to perform or failed to do their duty, the laws of the trust are still applicable to the property. So that means whatever private law that we've created to hold that asset or that interest is still holding that asset and interest. So we still have control over the asset and interest. The trust doesn't fail. And of course, we can apply a private administration system to try and compel them to act and do their duty. But at the end of the day, even if they fail to perform, we have still protected our asset and interest in the private trust.
So, with regards to the trustees, and I like what you said, a trust will not fail due to a trustee. Yeah, so I understand all that. I'm sure the audience understands all that. So, but a trustee has a responsibility to administer the trust.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
and do they do it as a favor? Where do they come from? Where do you get the trustees from? Is it somebody that you know, your next door neighbor?
So again, it depends on what we're doing. So we're going to in the third presentation, we're going to talk about the private estate structure with private
Great.
trusts in the private, which is completely separate from this here. In this presentation here, we are talking about how we access public services with a
Yeah.
private trust, where we actually appoint the officials inside the public agency. So let's look at HM Land Registry. Let's say you want to now contain your property in a private trust arrangement where you actually own the equity of your property. You're going to be appointing an official inside that agency at HM Land Registry. Okay. Now, when you do that, you're going to send all the trust documents and all the property titles back to HM Registry with a covering letter that says, right, I've just expressed this trust. I'm coming forward as the living beneficiary. Here's the documented proof of my declaration of status. I've now claimed all the equity of my property in accordance with trust law and law of equity. I am now appointing you as the trustee in this matter to now manage and hold this trust for and on my behalf. And I'm doing this in accordance with trust law and law of equity. So please perform. I'm expecting you to perform in accordance with equity, because there is a maximum of equity that says equity sees that as done what ought to be done. So remember, we've recognized and we've realized that there's a deception. There's been injustice because they've converted us into the citizen and the trustee. We've now come back to get justice and correct the situation in accordance with equity. And I'm now appointing you as the trustee. And the reason I'm appointing you as the trustee is because you're the one in the position of authority in that organization. No one else can do it. I would appoint someone else as the trustee, but they can't access the services. Only you can do it. So again, in accordance with law of equity, you should do what ought to be done. And that, Karen, where we get
that makes sense. But I'll ask these questions next time because we've gone to the hour, because I do have questions about how setting up the trust and the administration of it. One other thing, I love what you said there. But when you're sending all these documents and you are to them, can they just send them back? Will they just send them? Do they have to act on it? Because like you said, quite often when I've tried this in the past, you get ignored. You're not going to, let's say for council tax or something, they're not going to agree. Okay, no, we agree with you. You're not going to pay your council tax. Instead, they send the bailiffs round. So how do we overcome those situations?
Yeah, okay. So let's, like I said, there's a couple of elements to that. So there's doing something where we are taking a preventative measure before we get to a point where bailiffs are coming around. So the preventative measure is where we are wanting to establish a private trust arrangement with these public agencies. Yeah. What typically happens is a non-response. Can you imagine sending a private trust to the chief executive or the secretary of HM Land Registry? Yeah. they're not even going to entertain it. They're not even going to
No,
look at it, and they don't. So
no.
you send the documents out and they ignore it, and that's perfectly fine, Karen, because at the end of the day, in accordance with their own system, if they don't respond, then that's silent acquiescence. That's tacit approval because they've acted in dishonor. And
Yeah,
what we do is we have a private administration system where we follow it up. There's a three letter system where we go, right, you're now at fault. That's the first letter because you haven't responded or you haven't given me a proper response. And I'm just notifying to let you know you're at fault. We then send, after 7 days, we then send a second letter that says, right, you've not responded to my first letter. I'm giving you another 7 days to rectify this situation and come back to me and let me know you're going to perform as a trustee. And then if they don't, the third letter we send is obviously going to be a default. You've now defaulted on the trust. You have now violated the trust terms and you now are completely liable. That then becomes an adjudicated fact of law because what we're also doing is we're recording the whole process within our own private court as a private society. So we have the whole process recorded in documented form. We're also having it recorded in the public with public notaries. So even if we're brought into a public court, we have the documents to prove that, hang
yeah,
on, I did come forward. I did set this trust up. I've done it in accordance with trust law and the law of equity. I was done it peacefully and honourably. Here's all the paperwork to show that I sent the trust over to them. They completely ignored. I've done a private administration service. They still ignored it. Now the trust is vested. Once you've gone through that private administration system, in accordance with trust law and the law of equity, the trust is vested and it's beyond reproach. Now let's address the situation, Karen. You just sent about you've got to a point where there's bailiffs involved. Unfortunately, when you get to the point where there's bailiffs involved, you really are at the tail end of things there, and you're dealing with the system where they've gone past the point where you've completely defaulted, where you've acted in dishonor. So there are situations that you can use actual public forms to get a bailiff to back off. By the way, I'm not sure. I've been through it myself in my own life many years ago when I went through a bankruptcy process. I had bailiffs knocking on the door, which was a horrifying situation, especially when you've got family indoors asleep and you wake up in the morning, go to work,
mm,
the bailiffs at the door go, right, we're ready to come in and to take this, that, and the other. Panic mode, right? And
yeah,
I didn't know at the time that you can actually go and do a registration form. I forgot what it's called now, TU3 in a court the same day, and you can get the bailiffs to back off for 2 weeks while you then come forward to readdress the
yeah,
situation with a due process of law. So in that particular situation, if you've got bailiffs knocking the door, then you need to go through a public system to get back to a due process of law where you can start to address the situation. But really, what we're doing within our Sovereignty Academy is a preventative measure and a
yeah.
protective measure so that we don't get to the point where we've got bailiffs knocking at the door.
I think I'm glad you said that as well because I know a lot of people, I know of a lot of people that have signed up to certain other groups that are talking about sovereign law and they have got themselves in a bit of a mess, and with bailiffs at the door or losing stuff or paying a high fee to people that have given them advice and not paying mortgages and stuff like this. I know a lot of people have like panicked into, or they just thought, oh, this is an easy way out. I don't want to pay my council tax. I don't want to pay this. I don't want to do that and they've got into trouble. But this is a preventative measure, isn't it? We have to do all this so we're not in their system. And then I think if
Exactly.
you've done all this, you wouldn't end up in court anyway. They wouldn't want you in court because you know your stuff, and then you're going to show them up. You say, well, hang on a minute, you're not working in honour or acting in honour. Okay.
What's Yeah, what's very important about what you just said there is the fact that, as a citizen or even as a living man or woman, you are still the bonded surety for the citizen. So even though
Yeah.
the citizen and the living man or woman are two separate things, the moment you sign a contract or a legal form or any type of document in public, you're bonding your actual life to
Yeah.
that commitment. So, like you just said, you cannot stop paying for things or expect
Yeah.
that you don't no longer have to pay for your mortgage. So, what we're doing
Yeah.
is we're just changing it, restructuring everything lawfully,
Yeah.
and we're containing everything in private trust so we can live peacefully and honourably and protect ourselves from a system that's
Yeah.
becoming more aggressive, more corrupt, and much more injustice. And that's where I'll end it and leave it for you with a final word.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. For those that have been watching this, put some comments if you have got any comments or any questions. As you see, we will refer to them and answer them as best we can. I say we, Russell will. I'll read them out and Russell will. But yeah, put some comments, maybe subscribe to the channel to get more information and like it or dislike it or whatever. We're going to do another one then, right? I think we can keep these going if there's information to share. So again, I'll put your details on the bottom in the description for people to get hold of you. This is our third one, so if you haven't seen the other two, I suggest you do that because we're going to be moving through this. And yeah, thank you again for your time, Russell. It's been really good.
It's been a pleasure, Karen. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. And so just so people know, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Oh, good. I've got something really good in store for you. Next week, we're going to jump into the Declaration of Status, which is the pivotal document, the pivotal procedure that
Great.
starts the transition to sovereignty.
Fabulous. I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Take care.
I'll see you next week.